This is Green Bay Newsmakers, where your host Elliot Christensen asks the questions.
How did you get started? Anything you'd have done differently?
That highlight the best of northeastern Wisconsin's business community. And now, here's Elliot.
This is Elliot, and I am here to interview interesting entrepreneurs and business people, newsmakers, right? Green Bay Newsmakers. That's what I think we're looking for here. I'm hoping that my producer doesn't nix my entire introduction because it's kind of off the cuff. And this is our first one. This is episode number 1. For this episode, we are going to interview the founder of ReleaseWire and the Newsmaker Podcast Network, Mr. Daniel Jones. I have a little introduction here, and Daniel is the founder and CEO of ReleaseWire, an online newswire service and media engagement platform provider. ReleaseWire operates SBWire, a small business specialized newswire service and Newsmakers podcast network, which produces this show. So in regards to ReleaseWire, I've been learning a lot about ReleaseWire over the last 6 months. I'm amazed at the fact that I get these daily emails coming in from Google saying that my name is showing up in these news outlets because of the press release that was put out. So I know this stuff works. It's low cost. Daniel was telling me that ReleaseWire has services as low as $39.99, something like that. It kind of blew my mind. So I'm amazed. And anyway, I have with me Daniel Jones.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I mean, this is actually your studio, and I don't have a ton of studio experience. I've been in studios. I do the other podcast Ideas by Elliot with Nick over at Camera Corner Studios, and I think this is wonderful what you have here. You have some really cool stuff, and I know you do some other podcasts here.
Absolutely. We're building a full network of podcasts. So right now we've got 3 that are going. We've got several in pre-production, and we've got plans to do up to 20 by the end of the year. So we'll be doing hopefully 20 weekly or bi-weekly shows.
How many do I have to do?
That's a good question. You definitely have this one to do, and we have some other ideas that we'd like to bring you in on. So
nice.
Yeah, we'll keep you busy.
Well, I think we're busy already because we have this one, which I feel like this is our beta test. And what I didn't ask you off microphone, how should people get in touch with us if they have feedback?
Well, they can go to greenbaynewsmakers.com, and there's a contact form there. We definitely want to hear from people who would like to be on the show. Any entrepreneurs who would like to tell their story, we want to hear from you.
And they can hit me up on Twitter. I'm Elliot on Twitter, ELLIOT. So I'd kind of like to jump right into it, if
Absolutely.
That's okay.
I'm tempted to go with the line from your podcast. It's your show,
and it's super awkward because it's actually your show. So
I thought this would be fun.
So that's what I do want to ask you, and I want to wrap back to the beginning of your business. But the first thing, I know we touched on it a little bit, but what the heck possessed you to want to start a podcast network?
Well, that's actually a great story, I think. We had produced a podcast years ago with Tyler Henry and a few other people, and we had done really well, and we really enjoyed the process. We got to know so many different businesses through it, and as time went on, we kind of went our separate ways and got busy with other things, and I really missed that component. Take it a few years later, I was sitting at my desk one day and I said, I really miss doing something creative like that. And I went to my wife, Johnny, who works with me here at ReleaseWire, and I said, you know what? I'd like to start a podcast network. And I said, we'll keep it really simple, small budget, just a little thing. Well, as she knows me very well, whenever I say something little, it never is something little. She put her support behind it and helped me get things going. And then I brought my son, Jacob, who's producing this show for us here, into the mix.
Jacob.
Hello.
And
See, that's your cue.
Absolutely.
I'm in editing corner over here.
So I brought my son Jacob into it, and we just took off on it, and it's really been a lot of fun. And then, on top of that, we built the studio, and it's being used by ReleaseWire at the same time. So it's worked really well in that regard.
Yeah, I would say this is not small time. And like I said, I'm not a studio expert by any means. I show up and I talk into the microphone, and I do a mediocre job at that typically. So, but when I look around, you got light boxes and lights and LED panels and green screen. I don't even understand what's going on here. It's intense, and I think you're going to do some really good stuff here.
We have some stuff coming out, which we'll be announcing probably in about 30 days for ReleaseWire that's going to use this studio, and I'm really excited about it.
Did your wife say no?
She did not, actually. I think she said something along the lines of, well, if you're going to do it, you have to actually do it, because I have a tendency of coming up with a lot of really good ideas, and probably more than I could humanly handle. So I think she said, well, if you're going to do it, you got to make sure that you have the time to do it. She is the voice of reason many times when being the...
I can hear her voice in my head as you're saying the story
absolutely.
now.
She reins me in a lot of times where I say, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. And she says, okay, well, if you just tell me 5 things you want to do, pick 2 and be really good at them. And, she's absolutely correct. And, she said, as long as you have your plan and you know what you want to do, go for it. So, yeah, she's been very supportive on that.
So, and I've used this story. It's not much of a story. It's really brief. But I read this thing about Warren Buffett. I think most people know who Warren Buffett is. The world's most famous.
He's
investor.
one of our competitors, by the way.
Probably.
Well, he owns BusinessWire, one of our competitors.
That doesn't surprise me. I think he probably owns half the country.
Probably.
But so he said that sort of a secret to success for business is take your 25 most favorite things to do and throw away the bottom 20. And those top 5, those are the only things you're capable of having a business around. And I thought that was actually really strong advice. I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think that a lot of them are doing number 6 or 7 on their list.
Absolutely. And it's really hard to stop yourself from doing that. If you're a creative person and you're one of those people who likes to build things, you're always thinking of new ideas. And it is difficult to say, okay, even though I know I could do this, if I do that, I'm going to have to sacrifice something else that I'm good at. And I hate that process, honestly. I really do, because, I always say if there were 3 of me and they all thought like me, first of all, we get a lot of stuff produced and everything. But second of all, we wouldn't like each other.
Right? That is so true. I'd be like, well, the problem is that at least 2 of them would kill each other. So then you'd still be back down to 1.
And I'm really concerned that I wouldn't be one of the ones that survive.
Well, boy, that's sort of a Star Trek conversation I think you just went into. That's like, my mind was just blown. Yeah. I would like to find out about this whole beginning of ReleaseWire. And where I want to go with that, you and I first met, probably an embarrassingly long time ago. And
1997.
You guys are old.
Well, you know what? Mm-hmm. If you talk like that, you're not going to ever be that old.
Threat acknowledged.
So we talked about off air when we were doing all this planning, all of our history and sort of parallel paths. And I am fascinated about the now computing days and how you got from there to here, and even how you got into that. So jump in wherever you feel is appropriate. But I really do want to understand like how you went from selling custom PCs to doing things like ReleaseWire.
It all started in Chicago, actually. I was in high school, and I was always trying to figure out some business I wanted to run. I mean, it was like something that I knew forever that I wanted to do. So, years go by, and I start my first company with a guy named George Roberts, and we started building PC software to do bulletin boards, which is, the precursor to the internet. And, we did fairly well. We were late to the table, but we did, okay. But I had young children at the time, and I thought to myself, I really don't want to raise them in Chicago. I love Chicago, it's great, but it's not family friendly for me. I had friends here, and I came up to visit periodically, and I said, I really like Green Bay. So one day I decided I was going to move here, and I did. And I had a job with an ISP for a short while. realized that I still wanted to do my own thing. And again, one of those decisions, I just said, well, I'm going to start a business. And we started what became Now Computing kind of in the craziest way. We were doing a website for our bulletin board software, and we were with a hosting company out of Boston, and they were run by a whole bunch of engineers. So not good salespeople. They didn't know how to explain what it was they were doing. They didn't know how to sell their product, but they were good at managing their product. So I called them up and I said, you guys have a great setup here, but you're really bad at selling it. How about we sell it and you manage it? And we signed a deal and became the management company for this hosting company with a 50-50 split. And that's how we started Now Computing. It was just a chance that I took that these guys would say, yeah, sure, that's a great idea. And it actually worked really well. We continued, developing new things, and George and I built a website for downloading software for Windows primarily, because, we're not Mac people here.
That was your big mistake.
Yeah.
No, back then Macs sucked. I wasn't a Mac guy back then either.
Oh, I'm still not a Mac guy, but I can go on for that for hours.
We will.
We will. So we developed this website to basically like a business directory of software that was downloadable, and it grew really fast. And we had a internet company at the time. They were called Internet.com. They've gone through many name changes since, but they contacted us and they acquired it. So we had this product that we were managing that was owned by someone else, and we had a lot of extra time on our hands. And one of the things that frustrated me was I could never find parts for computers that I needed in town. This was pre-CyberWorks. It was just difficult to find what I wanted. So again, one of those snap decisions that I'm going to open a computer store. And I did. And we did it with almost no budget. We opened up on Adams and we ran it for several years. It was a great experience and I learned a lot. And, at some point we decided, well, this doesn't really make enough money, and we moved on. But that's how that started.
Entrepreneurs typically have that idea that is, either scratching their own itch. And I'm always fascinated by the different types of entrepreneurs. So there's the marketing entrepreneur who sees a market opportunity. There's the craftsperson or the engineer type of entrepreneur who just says, I'm good at this, and somebody better pay me to do it. And there's probably every type in between those. And I think that the people that are the most successful as being entrepreneurs, I'm not talking about the Steve Jobs story or anything like that, but people who are able to build a sustainable business, I feel like they have characteristics of both. They understand the marketing angle, but they also really enjoy the craftsmanship of creating something. So, and I guess I can sort of relate to that, but I always viewed the computer business as being, I guess like the PC business as being so hyper competitive. I wouldn't have even known that was an itch I would want to scratch. So that's interesting. The transition from there to here now, how did that happen?
So after Now Computing, which we ran for several years, and then George decided to go back to Chicago, I started another company, a web hosting company, and I really shouldn't have. I had great success with Now Computing, followed by the quick end, and my mind and everything just wasn't in the right place. So we ran the hosting company for about a year, and it just, my heart wasn't in it. I didn't really want to do it. We ended up selling it to one of our customers basically just to get out of it. And I thought, what am I going to do now? I have worked for myself.
Is we, you and George?
No, George had gone to Chicago, so it was Johnny and I who.
Okay.
And
so that's where she came in as sort of.
She actually worked for me at Now Computing, and got more involved as time went on. And then after Now Computing, she told me she would never work with me again. It was quite a bit of effort to bring her into ReleaseWire.
I think I did a great job of stifling my laughter there.
So we had the hosting company, and it just didn't go well. And I thought, okay, well, I need to take a break from doing this and go work for someone.
Right.
So I looked around, almost got hired by the Press Gazette. That was an interesting story. But then I ended up working with David Troop with his Mail Foundry product, which was an anti-spam service.
Sure.
And I did this for about 3 years. And all the time doing it, I was like, I just could not understand the concept that I had to ask permission for things. So I'm sure I drove David nuts, and maybe we should get him on the show sometime and ask him that. But I just was so used to being in charge that when I would go to him and say, hey, I want to do this, and he'd be like, well, I'll think about it and get back to you. I'm like, no, I want to do it. And it became very clear to me that I need to get back into it. At the same time, I started another software download information site, and it was doing really well. And we would, deal with press releases from those software developers. I started thinking, I get all these emails, all these press releases, and some of them are really good, some of them are really bad, and the vast majority of them had nothing to do with what we were talking about in the site. Like most tech people, I tried to, control that. So I said, well, I'll create some filters in my email, and I can do this. It turned out that it became so cumbersome that I started ignoring all the press releases. So at one point I decided, I'm going to go back and look and see, what did I miss? And I missed some really interesting products that I would have liked to talk about. So I said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way that you could distribute press releases to people, to journalists and bloggers, but not drive them nuts with all this stuff that's irrelevant to what they need to do. That was how we created SB Wire. We took a totally different approach than everyone else in the industry. We said, we're not going to send your press releases to thousands of journalists. That's just crazy. We're going to send it only to those journalists that we believe with a high level of confidence would be interested. To this day, and this is 11 years later now, we still have to have that conversation over and over and over with our clients because the rest of the industry has, sold based on volume. That's all they care about is, we'll get your press release to thousands of journalists. Well, that makes no sense. Is if you think of the journalists out there, typically they're only interested in a small fraction of the content they receive. And if you overwhelm them with content from something completely irrelevant, they're going to remember you and they're going to not, write about you.
So everyone that I tell this story to, as poorly as I probably do, but it clicks. I think that I think they get it now. And I don't know, I think something changed in our society where I think that more small businesses are taking on they're taking more ownership of their publicity. They don't have I don't want to cut down the media necessarily because it's not all their fault, but there's not these gatekeepers that there used to be, or there's more gatekeepers maybe. I don't know how to refer to that, but it clicks.
I think there's been a monumental shift, and that being that a lot of the large media organizations are just downsizing to ridiculous levels. So most of your journalists are now independent. So they're bloggers or they're freelancers, and they're managing their own show. They don't have an editor who's doing it for them. That changes that dynamic because they don't have that gatekeeper anymore. They don't have someone assigning them stories. That means that they've got to decide what's important to them. And we have seen a large number of bloggers and freelancers, more than we ever have before. On top of that, social media is a huge key to it. And there's so much content out there that you're competing with all this. And if you're just force-feeding information, you're just going to get deleted.
You have a way for these journalists to subscribe right on ReleaseWire, or right?
Absolutely. We have a full set of tools for journalists so that they can go in and create their own profiles.
So they log in, create an account, and then they can subscribe, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so my understanding, and I'm like 10,000 foot view or 1 inch view, I don't know how you want to describe it, where I don't understand fully the mechanics behind it. But they can subscribe based on categories, right?
They can subscribe and then build a profile based on a whole bunch of different characteristics. So to give you an example, I could say, I want press releases from companies located in Green Bay, Wisconsin, who are talking about the internet industry. But here's the secret sauce to that. We control the quality. So we say, you set what threshold you want. So a journalist can say, well, I only want to see the top
press releases, only from those companies that are really newsworthy and only newsworthy content in the release. They can set that. And we have a team of editors here who look at every press release, and based on over 100 different characteristics, we assign a value of quality. That's an important part because you have some people who do press releases that are just very low quality. And you have some who do things that are really high quality, really newsworthy. And they should not get an equal, view of the world, I don't think.
What if something's sort of between categories? And I'm having difficulty trying to come up with an example, but an Apple car. Okay, so because we all love Apple products. So let's say somebody writes something. They put out, Apple puts out a press release on their car, and you have these categories. One would be whatever. I'm just making things up right now, but automotive, computers, whatever, right? And it kind of doesn't fit cleanly into some of these categories. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So how do you assign quality there?
When we talk about quality, we're not really looking industry specific. We're looking more newsworthy value. And we're looking more on quality of the way it's structured, the way it's written. But when we talk about targeting, we look at journalists individually, and we also look at media outlets. We can tell this media outlet is interested in automotive topics, therefore, this is a good fit for them. We can tell this, other media outlet is very interested in hardware, computer hardware. So it's still probably appropriate for them. We look at so many factors that it's really easy for us to go down to that level and find ones that are appropriate. Obviously, there's always going to be something that, really odd that we have a difficult time with, but then we'll, look at other layers like keywords and things like that to help us categorize it. We have 140 different industries that we're tracking. We have thousands of locations that we're tracking, just all kinds of different factors that we look at.
So your editors are making that determination, not the customer.
It's actually kind of a partnership. The customer will define what is important to them, and then the editor, after looking over the content, will add to that, or in some cases subtract from that, if it makes sense. So we work together with the customer to come up with a good profile. And we do the same thing on the journalist side. We'll work with journalists to help them get what they want out of the system.
Okay, so you have the software website, and you say the press releases are sort of the all over the place, and you want to corral that in. Did you go all in on press releases? Did you ease your way into that?
Actually, we did it kind of as a side project. We started SBWire. We didn't tell anyone really. We just put it out there, and we we put like a banner ad, I think it was, on the software site. We just were amazed with how many people signed up without us really doing anything, just putting it out there. We were really focused on the software side of it, the software directory. Again, as luck would have it, someone came to us and said, we want to buy that business from you.
Okay.
We sold it to a company out of Bangladesh. With the money that we got from that, we built SBWire. We really just did not realize how much of a need there was for that service. And, we also didn't price it well in the beginning. We made it free with a premium level, but the free service was so good that we had thousands of companies using it, and some pretty big companies using it, but we weren't making any revenue. Several years after that, we realized that we had to redo the business model, and we came up with a subscription-based system. We came up with a, total change in the pricing model. And, in doing so, we grew substantially within the first year of doing that.
I think last week I had asked you some questions about press releases and what your recommendations were for small businesses. And you had this great catchphrase where and I think you stole it from Jacob, but
I steal a lot from him.
I would not be surprised.
But you described in the modern age that a press release is so essential to a business that it's like your blog specific for journalists. And I actually think that that's a super great description of it, because that just gelled in my mind.
Absolutely. And, we work really hard at teaching our clients the language of a journalist. Just the flow of a press release has to be in a specific way, because as a journalist looks at it, they're very trained
on where to look for things and where to get the information they need. If you don't understand that language, you're not going to communicate with them. There is so much content that people put on a blog, and they spend a lot of effort thinking, what can I do? What can I blog about? But they don't also go down this other channel. And it's just a missed opportunity then.
Yeah. So you have this blossoming business, and aside from the, like you described, the business model challenge, what other challenges did you encounter in that first year?
Well, the first few years, actually, we did it just me running it and Johnny, my wife, helping out. And we grew so fast, and we just could not, manpower-wise, handle it. I brought in my children who were, in high school at the time to help out. And, Jacob's still with us. My daughter, Jacqueline, is still with us. My son, Zach's still with us. So I've got, 3 out of my 5 children work here. And that allowed us to keep growing.
And that's awesome, isn't it, Jacob?
Oh, it's great. When someone's mad at you, you don't get to escape it.
Yeah, and it was worse when they lived with us still. Luckily for Jacob, he lives on his own and, doesn't have to, deal with me at home. It allowed us to grow. And at one point, I said to Johnny, I said, it's time we probably think about hiring people. And the reaction I got was, I'm not doing it. Her reason was very sound, because we're really bad at hiring when it came to now computing. Her resistance to it was very strong, and I don't blame her in the least. But at one point, she realized that we just were struggling to keep up. So we decided to move into a new office and to start hiring. And this time we went through a total change in the way that we did things. Because in the now computing days, if you were a friend of ours and you said, hey, I need a job, we hired you because we didn't know what we were doing. And
well, you never told me that.
we hired so many of our friends, and many of them really worked hard for us. But the strain on the friendship was astronomical, right. And especially if they didn't work hard. It was not a good fit. When we started hiring here, we went through a whole process of really understanding what it is that we wanted to do with hiring, and how did we want people to fit into the culture we were building. I'm happy to say that out of the people that we've hired here, almost no one leaves because they are unhappy. And we've had people here for years who have no interest in leaving, and we don't want them to leave. Right. We have a great team here. We have some great people who really work hard and really care about their customers.
Boy, so that opened up all sorts of questions for me. But I kind of want to make sure to, okay, so in our production meeting, that is new to me.
Yeah, when we asked Elliot to join us to do this show,
he said, "You're going to have it. This is going to be like an actual job where so you're going to
actually come into our office and meet with us periodically to discuss what we're doing."
Which is good, but there's a learning curve. I'm not going to lie. So, but we we jotted down some great questions, and I kind of so you were in the meeting, so you know that.
I specifically have tried not to remember them so that I would.
Well, you're doing a horrible job because you covered most of them. But so I do kind of want to circle back to just a few of the things that we kind of threw out there. And one great question that that kind of goes back to, you were talking about hiring, and one of our questions that we talked about in our meeting was, when you were a kid, did you envision doing this?
Absolutely. And
you did?
Absolutely.
You thought, I'm going to be Daniel Jones, podcast network owner.
I thought when I was, I want to say maybe 9 years old, I had fully decided I was going to run my own business. And all through my entire high school career, that's all I talked about with my friends, is I'm going to run my own company. I've always planned on doing that.
But you didn't know what you wanted to do.
I had so many ideas in the past, and I mean, this is now the 4th company I've run. So, and this is 11 years. So, I mean, that gives you kind of an understanding. I've been doing this for a long time. But I always knew I wanted to run a company. And obviously it was going to be in the tech space because that's what I know. And it's going to have some sales and marketing side because that's what I did before I started my own company. And, fill in the gaps between companies. But I remember telling my mother, and I was little, and I said, when I get older, I'm going to start my own business, and I'm going to do something with computers, and that's what I did.
So as a kid, and I'm afraid of the answers because I think they're going to be a little bit like mine. But how did you prepare yourself for what was to come?
That's a good question. And I think one of the failures early on was I didn't prepare enough. I was very quick to react and very quick to just jump into something. So, I'd find this new niche that interests me. We'll go back to my first company that I ran, bulletin board software. I liked bulletin boards, therefore I can make that. And I just did it. Having success early on with that method did not prepare me for the difficulties when you don't have success. When it comes so naturally with your first and your second companies, and then your third one's failing miserably, and a lot of it's because you don't have the tools that you should have had. You just really don't know how to handle that. So when we started this company, we spent a lot of time really looking at what are we doing, how are we going to do it, and what are we going to do if it doesn't work. And, again, going with that entrepreneur brain, the concept of what my great idea isn't going to work, is that possible?
Yeah.
I had to learn that was definitely possible. We've been very lucky with ReleaseWire, but there have been times where we've, come up with new products or something that just didn't work. And you have to know when that's happening, and you have to know how to handle it. And
it took me till 2016 to figure that out. So lots of things there. You have your great idea. You're an entrepreneur. I think in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to delude yourself into thinking that you can't fail, because you would never. If you knew that failure was an option, you'd quit so quickly in the process. So there has to be a certain amount of insanity that envelops you that does not allow failure to enter your mind.
I often say I'm insane. I mean,
well, I wasn't saying you specifically.
But I honestly think when I think of the amount of work that I put into building this company, and the amount of work that I've expected other people to put in, sometimes it makes you wonder, how driven do you have to be?
So that's exactly the issue that I had when I had the whole hiring process. Oh boy. So when we were growing the dial-up business and all of that, we needed people to be to answer the phone. It was to the point where if somebody would have been walking down the street and looked in, I would say, "Hey, do you need a job?" And that was preposterous. That was stupid talk, because one good person can easily take the place of several bad ones, believe me. But these are things that didn't occur to me because you're so blindly focused on success that you think that you're just going to be able to osmosis that into other people, that your passion becomes their passion, that they're going to work harder than they've ever worked for I don't even know what reason. But and amazingly, that did happen sometimes. I think it happened with you, but sometimes it didn't. And for whatever reason, that comes as a shock to me. And I wish I would have learned that in school or somewhere.
Yeah. One of our upcoming guests for this show just recently started a business. And, when I heard that he had planned on doing so, I said to him, you should come and sit with me and just ask me any questions you could think of. Because if I had had that when I first started, if I had someone who had been doing it for years who would sit down with me and just say, here's the mistakes that I made, and here's why I made them, and here's why you might want to make them still. Just that amount of knowledge that I didn't have. And I said, to him, pick my brain, take anything you can from it. I wouldn't be offended if you think, you don't like anything I say, but, I would have loved to have had that resource when I started.
Okay. So I hear you say that, and I think I want to agree with that, but I think I was so full of myself that I don't know. I don't know that I would have had the right questions. I don't know that I certainly don't think I would have listened to unsolicited advice. I don't know. I would love to take myself and do some time travel.
I would not want to do that.
No,
honestly,
well.
I look back at some of the things that I, tried to do years ago. Some of them I'm amazed that I even thought it was a good idea. There are some things that we did, like when we were in the bulletin board software, we brought in a product that's still used today. It's RAR, the compression software, kind of like Zip.
Sure. Yep.
We were one of the first retailers to bring that in to the country from Russia. That was probably one of my favorite experiences way back then. We worked with a Finnish company and the Russian developer to bring this product in. And what was the cool thing about that is at the time George and I were working together, and we were night owls, so we would program all night and sleep during the day. I can't do that now. And it worked perfectly because the programmer and this gentleman that we worked with in Finland, they were up then. So we could do our conference calls and everything then.
Right.
At what was it, like $2 a minute calling Finland back then?
Uh-huh.
Again, pre-internet. So we didn't have all that instant communication.
So I know you were trying to explain the fascination of international commerce, and all I could think about is, guys like us work at night, and you guys work during the day, and you don't get it. And I feel like I had coffee with my dad this morning, and I feel like I am in such a different world from him. And he's always worked a 9-to-5 job. He's never been an entrepreneur, and he's never been a programmer. And there's just, for all sorts of reasons, especially back in the day, telecom prices were cheaper at night, all sorts of stuff, right? We just grew to be night owls.
Absolutely.
And so you're not alone in that. And I always felt a little guilty because I felt like so many managerial types, I guess, they would get up at 5 a.m, they'd go work out, they'd run the businesses, and I felt like, I'm less than. And I still feel that a little bit, and maybe I should feel that more. But I'm always amazed that I feel like that doesn't get enough coverage. That there are people that can be successful and can be a little non-traditional.
Yeah, and I think non-traditional is a good way to put it. We really didn't try to be a 9-to-5 kind of business back then. And, with ReleaseWire, we're absolutely 9-to-5. And I'm not a morning person.
Please turn all cell phones on vibrate.
So you guys run a tighter ship around here. That's like a running gag between me and Nick, because up until this last week, and I've been doing this for months now, I never put my cell phone on vibrate. Now I do. Mine's good.
Mine is on vibrate, but I set a timer just to give an idea.
I saw that.
And yeah.
Are we at the 3-hour mark already?
We're close.
We're not having pizza till 9 o'clock. We're good.
You're paying, right?
What?
That's my son for you. He knows how to get.
You're the overpaid producer, brother.
Wait, I'm getting paid?
So
Anyway,
you were talking about non-traditional.
Yes.
I think ReleaseWire is probably the most traditional of the businesses I've run. We have a management structure. We have a 9-to-5 kind of thing. We have a lot more process in place. It's kind of foreign to me at times because, I am such a, jump into something kind of guy. And, we really work at not being so much that. But we still allow that because I think the most creativity comes from that. So, with Newsmakers, Jacob, our producer here, actually works with 2 other podcasts in the network. And I tell them, experiment. Have fun with it because they're young guys and they're just learning. I want them not to, lock themselves into something and miss all those opportunities.
And you think that comes as a function of being non-traditional, being entrepreneurial yourself?
I absolutely think so.
And is it working?
Well, I don't know, Jacob. What do you think? Is it working for you?
Well,
I didn't mean that to be negative. I mean, do you see a downside to that, I guess?
There's a downside to being an entrepreneur as far as I'm concerned, and that's that you don't have that stability. I know when I worked for other companies, I would work 9 to 5, I'd go home, and I wouldn't think about work anymore. I would have that time with the family completely separate from work. When you're running your own business, you have it on the brain 24/7. One of the things I always love to say is when people come up to me and say, "You're so lucky, you're self-employed, you get to make your own schedule." I say, I do. 24/7, 365.
Right.
Because it never stops.
I have a quick story about that. I know you are constantly thinking about work when you're at home, and some of your best ideas come at the weirdest times. I remember we were trying to pick a voice talent to do our intros and outros for one of our shows, Gaming Buzz, and you called me while I was on the bus, and you just went, "John St. John."
That is true.
But it has to be that way. And what fascinates me is that people that aren't entrepreneurs are as different as they are from us in that regard. Where I don't know how you can have a job and just turn it off and still show up to work. Then I don't know how you can do that. If I don't, I have to be all in, or I hate to say it, but I'm kind of all out.
Right. It's hard to keep that same level of energy going. I did it for 3 years with the last company, and as I said, we should have Troop come on here because he can tell you that I was difficult, and I freely admit that because I just I wanted to be an entrepreneur within.
He doesn't like talking about himself.
I think there is, something we said, and I said when I did work there, I didn't think about work when I went home, and that was kind of foreign to me. For a short while, I enjoyed that, but then the creative side of me got back in and said, "Hey, aren't you bored?"
Yeah,
and I was.
Yeah, well, I mean, so even in my free time, I'm sort of sadistic on myself. I read biographies of business people.
Right.
So I think Bill Gates, he goes on a sabbatical every year and he reads books that don't have anything to necessarily do with Microsoft. And now he's sort of semi out of Microsoft. But when he's on, he's on. But he would take that week or so every year and kind of not be on. So I think that that's healthy. And I have not ever really been able to do that.
Now I have to ask. You said you read books.
Yeah.
Do you read books?
No. I do. I do audiobooks now. But however, the Bill Gates book, I forget which one where that came up. And I know it was in a book. I don't know if it was in a biography per se, but it was a book that mentioned him. And that was a paper book. I remember where I was when I read it.
Let me get
Really
this straight.
strange.
You remember where you were when you read it, but
Yeah.
you don't remember what the book was.
Because there's so many, and I don't remember which one. So you know what? Okay, so he's calling me out on this, right? Totally fair. Because I tend to read or audio, in the case of audiobooks, like clusters of things that are all sort of around one topic. So the last couple of years, it's been a bunch of Steve Jobs books, right? So I can remember where the idea came, but I can't remember the actual book, if that makes any sense. But fair enough to call me out on that.
I have a hard time reading a book. And, I think this is kind of where,
It's the
content is now.
Part of it's that ADD thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a hard time reading a book. I can't really get from cover to cover on anything. And I will get a book, and I'll be really interested in it. I'll get into about 3 or 4 chapters, and I'll come back to it. And I probably never do. I mean, there's very few times where I go back and finish it. So I look for things in smaller doses to just kind of be incremental at that point.
Well, that's sort of the world we live in. And I read a quote, not to belabor the book thing, but I read a quote just the other day that said, all the books I buy are a promise to myself about the time I will have in the future. You don't have time enough or focus enough, but it's like the hope. You're buying hope when you buy a book that I'm going to have time to dedicate to that. And that was interesting.
I would agree with that.
And I don't, especially with audiobooks, I kind of do that, but I kind of don't do that. I get it, and then I listen to it, and because I can do it while I'm doing other things.
So I'm guessing you buy these on iTunes?
No, I have an Audible subscription, and
An Amazon product.
You know what? I would hate to see at the end of the year how much money I spend with Amazon and Apple And if I did, I would probably have to say, no more blue light products anymore. Sorry, I kind of got us a little bit off topic. You mentioned, and obviously we have a relation in the room, Jacob, right? So you mentioned that you work with your family, and so have there been any? What are the pros and cons of that?
The pros is you have a trust that you don't normally have with other people. I trust that my family is not going to do something to harm me or the business. One of my favorite stories is one day we were in a meeting, and my wife was trying to convey an idea that she had, and I was just not getting it. I was probably crabby. That happens,
You?
Yeah. And I said something to her, and she goes, "Don't talk to me like I'm your wife." And we all kind of stopped in the room, and she was completely right. And we all kind of laughed about it, but she was right. It is, the downside is it's really hard to switch that mentality. When we started this company, I made it very clear, if you come work, as a family member, you have to understand that when we're here, I'm the boss. I'm the CEO of the company. It's my responsibility. When we're not here, those dynamics can be completely different. For Johnny and I, we really had to work at that. And, I think she and I do a pretty good job. It is a downside sometimes because you could have a really bad day at work and then you go home and you want to not have that tension. And it's really hard to just say, okay, that's work and we're going to let it go. I think there's pluses and minuses. And,
So how do you?
A lot of communication.
Yeah.
A lot of saying, hey, I know that you're upset with this. This is work. Let's talk about it at work tomorrow. Let's enjoy our evening. And, sometimes it's not too easy. Johnny and I have a great relationship, and, we're around each other 24/7. We work together, we live together, and we really work at that. Part of it is we just enjoy being around each other. So it's not that hard for us. But I know a lot of couples who have owned companies together who just struggle so much with that because, they need that time away. Some people like to go to work and get away from their family for a little bit. I'm not one of those people, but I do know some people who are very much like, I like that 8 hours where I'm not with my family. And, a lot of our friends say, well, how do you guys do that? How do you, never get away from each other? It's just natural for us. We just enjoy being together.
So Gina's never going to listen to this, right?
I can't guarantee that.
Well, I think she would agree with us, but it's a little bit cliche, but people change. And I think that the story of the entrepreneur is usually one of change. And and I feel bad saying this, but I feel like there was a day where Gina and I were able to do that. Like, we couldn't picture it being any other way. We did everything together, probably to a fault. And at some point, just due to the dynamics of the business, the dynamics of our positions in the business, outside forces, I feel like that is really hard to sustain. And I don't know if it's a sickness that you have or if it's something to be commended and sought after. I don't know.
I always tell couples that I know who are thinking about going into business together to really think hard about it. Because, Johnny and I don't think are typical. And I think most couples have a problem with working together, especially in the bad times. It's really easy to work together when everything's going great and there's no struggle. It's different when things are not going well. And, that's when you really get tested.
Yeah. Tested is an interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
Yep.
It's, yeah. And what's fascinating about that, and I never told people to think hard about it. I told them to think hard about not doing that. And people would always say that to me too. Like, how can you do that? I could never do that. And I said, it's okay. It works fine. But yeah, you do get tested, and it becomes really hard, and all of your character flaws come out then.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, even though Johnny and I have this really strong relationship and we really enjoy working together, I think she's quit probably 3 times, and I've probably fired her probably 3 times, and she's probably tried to fire me 3 times. There are days, but I would not have continued to do this without her.
See, so it's a corporate structure that makes it work, because I couldn't fire her. It was like written into our bylaws, like we couldn't fire each other. So I think that maybe that was part of it.
Yeah, and it does sound weird to say, but I do truly believe that if you don't have a structure and you don't have a list of responsibilities, and you're going to struggle with that. The joke that Johnny and I tell all the time is, I'm the boss here, she's the boss at home. But in reality, there is some truth to that.
No, I think that's crucial, because otherwise you feel like that dynamic never stops. Right. And it is important to feel like there are many times where I felt like I was the boss nowhere. And I'm sure that Gina felt the same way.
Absolutely. And I'm sure Johnny feels that, because I kind of have a overpowering personality.
Yeah, it's hard. When I'm pissed off about something, I'll be like, I don't even have. When we had a dog, I'm like, I'm like 6th on the totem pole here. It was horrible.
Well, you do realize the dogs always, get a little bit more attention.
But I felt like I should have been. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're probably right. I shouldn't have compared myself to the dog. I should have compared myself to Kyle.
Yeah. And Johnny and I have 5 children between us, and that's a lot of work in and of itself. Now, luckily, most of our children are adults now, and on to their own things. But I'll tell you, when we had the 5 kids living with us, that was harder than work, by far. I found work to be like my vacation from everything going on at home. And we have some really good kids, but there's always something, someone's sick, or someone needs this, or someone needs that. It's so much more work to be at home than it is to be at work. And it's something I feel like I have less control over by far.
Well, and Max is 12, and I feel like things have changed, and they certainly have changed since when we were kids. I don't think my mom ever even went to a basketball game that I had. And now there's like this expectation. You're at every event. Your kids are involved in so much stuff, and that definitely is a tremendous amount of work. And I almost feel like it's more work having 1 kid right now than it was having 2. And the 2 were harder than when my parents had 5. And I would imagine. I can't imagine I exactly know what you're talking about there. And I think that is it's amazing that you've been able to create this family business that is semi-functional. I mean, and I think more than semi-functional. I'm actually amazed that works.
One of the things that we had to do, my oldest son worked here for quite a while from high school on, and he had never had a job outside of the company. So we actually got to a point where we fired him, and we let him go out and find some other jobs.
Right.
And he was gone for about a year. And when he came back, he had a totally different understanding of what he had here. Sometimes you have to go and experience those things.
Right.
And you have to go see how difficult it can be getting a job that you enjoy and then coming back to it. With him, it really was a benefit for him to go away for a while and come back. The other kids, they have their days. Jacob, our producer here, some days he's my right-hand man. The other days, I'd like to, send him home and not see him for a few weeks. And that comes with the territory. And in the same respect, I feel sorry for my kids some days, because they have to deal with me, being the boss. And then, as I said, when they live with us, we go home and I'd still be the boss. And they never got a break from us, telling them what to do, so to speak.
Yeah. It's a tough thing, because it's super cliche when people call their business their child, and I don't really like that analogy. It's like, that's your business. If you're an entrepreneur, that's you.
Yeah, I never think of it as a child. I think of it as an extension of my being.
Right. And so you want your family to share that, to appreciate that, to share in your successes, to be pissed off at your failures. and you want them to that's what I think that's what all entrepreneurs are seeking. They want these people that are going to be subservient to them, but want to share in the party when there's a success. I think that's ultimately what I always sought, which is dysfunctional. It's completely insane. Yep. And so I look at other businesses, and I see attempts sometimes to transcend generations, to have a second generation or a third generation, and that is super difficult. So you haven't had to hand the reins over yet, and I think we alluded to that in our production meeting. Do you ever see that happening?
I have 5 children. The youngest 2 do not work here, and I don't expect that they will. But the youngest one I could see taking my place. And I think it would be a case where she'll go out in the world and do all these things that interest her and then come back and, when I'm ready to be done, I could see her taking over. And the worst of that is she'd probably become Jacob's boss, and I don't know how that'd go.
There would be many chairs thrown.
I got your back, Jacob. I got your back.
I think
we're not letting no pipsqueak come in here and take over.
I think, like in the case of all my children, each of them have different, I'm going to go with features and benefits. And one of them
it's a sterile way to say it, but I know what you're saying.
Right. And like I think Jacob's extremely intelligent, but I don't think he'd want to run a business. And the same with my other children. I don't think that's their drive. And I think you have to have that.
Yeah. I think you do too, and there's drive is probably just stands alone. That's probably enough. It's like this singular focus where again you don't accept failure. You have to ignore all of the minor things that are in your way because there's these big goals, there's these big challenges in front of you, and that's what I'm tackling. I'm going after that. And it takes a certain amount of crazy to do that, and
crazy is a good word.
Oh my God, to sustain that, the older I get, the more respect I have for entrepreneurs, not less. I do think that we're all crazy, but I just find people who can do it and can be successful. You asked how my interview with Brent went the other day. Phenomenal, and he has that fake humbleness, but. And he's learned that too. Maybe to not come across as arrogant as me.
I have not learned that, and I actually try to learn that.
Me too.
I come across sometimes as being just really full of myself, and sometimes it's just for fun, but sometimes it's just because if I didn't have that level of confidence in what I'm doing, some days I wouldn't do it.
Well, your customers want that.
Absolutely.
Your customers don't want you to go, well, I think I can do it. Who wants to buy anything? You go to McDonald's and you're like, oh, can I have a burger? And they're like, I'm not super sure. Like when you have a business, you have to provide quality. You don't have a choice. It's thrown on you.
It's interesting. The other day, I have not done sales for our company for years. And the other day I had to get a sales call because everyone was out of the office. And I felt so uneasy doing it, something that I used to do on a daily basis. And I just remembered, like, when I talked to people before, it was like I was so sure of what I was saying to them. And I didn't have that same reaction this time. And that's just, repetition and practice and whatever, I guess. But
right.
It was just weird. It was like, something I've done for years, but because I've gotten a few years out of it, I felt like I had no clue what I was doing. And I'm the one who comes up with the sales strategy, but implementing it felt weird to me.
So do you feel like it's important to take a step back and to try doing that every once in a while to make sure that you're not losing sight of things? Or do you think that you did it and you've internalized the important parts about it and you can create marketing and sales strategies without that?
No, I think that I need to do it. And this is something that I actually have been working proactively on. I need to go back and just be a part of the different departments that we have here and the different processes. And
find the things that aren't working the way I think they should. It's so difficult to fix things when you're not actually seeing it on a daily basis. You know, my team's really good about coming to me and saying, hey, I'd really like it if you'd make this, do that. But that lack of connection between the process and me makes it hard for me to solve their problems. So, you know, one of the things that I rarely do here is edit a press release, but every once in a while I'll go in and do that, and it's painful. And, you know, everyone makes fun of me. It's like, oh, it took you 15 minutes to do something. It takes me 2. Well, absolutely. You know, practice, you know, is a big part of it, and repetition. But if I don't do that, I feel so disconnected from what they're doing that I feel like I'm not helping them enough.
So you're in good company in that. I have a self-professed addiction to Amazon and Apple, right? And both Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs, they both would commandeer the front lines every once in a while. They would take customer service calls. And I think that helped them in lots of different ways, right? Not just that they would have an appreciation for what their customer service people are going through, but they also wanted to have they wanted to be able to take the pulse of their customers.
I think that's a big part of it.
So, yeah, I think you kept stressing in our production meeting, Green Bay. This is Green Bay Newsmakers. So why, you have this business that could be in Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
So why are you still here?
Well, you know, 40% of our clients are in India. I would say probably
40%
of our clients are in India.
Wow.
A good percentage of them are in Pakistan.
I wasn't kidding. You really could be in India.
We could be anywhere.
Wow.
And I chose to move here because of the fact that it's a very family-friendly place, and I really like the schools. I really like the community. I love living here. So, you know, there are some things that I would like to see improved. For most people who know me, they know I don't drive. So I choose to live downtown. I choose to work downtown. And there's certain amenities that are just not here. And that's a big frustration. I'll tell you a fun story. I hadn't been to Chicago in like 5 years. And Johnny and I decided to take the kids last summer. We went for a few days. I felt so out of place. You know, this is a place that I lived in almost my entire young life. And I felt lost because I am so comfortable here. I like the community. I like the people here. There are some drawbacks because you never know who knows someone, and I can't count the number of times that you comment on someone, oh, so-and-so did this. Oh, I know him.
Oh, right.
You know, you have that lack of anonymous discussion sometimes, and I think that's...
And it's horrible.
Yeah. I can't count the number of times that, you're sitting, at a restaurant and you mention something to someone. Oh, you're talking about so-and-so. Oh, how do you know them? Our guest for next week. I had no idea that you knew him.
Yeah. He was on our softball team. And you don't believe that, do you?
I'm just wondering who was better.
I was better, but not by that much.
Next week, we're going to tell him that you said that.
I don't think he'd have a problem with that. And it wasn't. We were the weak links. I'm not gonna lie. It's interesting. So I saw a thing on Facebook where the guy who plays Superman in the new Superman versus Batman movie, he had a Superman T-shirt on. Maybe you saw this, and he was walking around New York with posters of his face in the background doing selfies, showing that nobody cared. And so, that's the difference between New York and Green Bay, right? You could be walking down the street for no particular reason at all, and 1 out of every 2 people you see, you're going to know. And that's just the reality that we live in. And there's tremendous good in that. But, it's also, it'd be nice to be anonymous once in a while.
For me, it's a little different. And, it's something we didn't talk about much, but I do have a visual impairment. And I don't recognize people unless they speak to me often, which is, in a small community like this where so many people know you, I can't count the number of times that someone says to me, well, I walked by you and you didn't say hello.
Oh, right.
And I have to explain to people so many times, well, it's not that I didn't say hello, it's that I had no idea it was you. And unless you say, hey, it's so-and-so, I'm not going to recognize you. And, that's one of those obstacles for me that's difficult. And, in Chicago, I never really cared about that because I would never run into people I knew because, there's just so many people. And I didn't feel that, I was ignoring people, I guess. A lot of times when I meet someone new, I have to take that time to say to them, just so you understand, if I see you in public and you don't, tell me who you are or something, or, come up to me and say hi, I may have no idea. And it's not that I'm ignoring you. It's not that I'm, trying to be disrespectful. I truly have no idea.
So I forget about that sometimes.
Absolutely.
And I don't, maybe I should feel bad about that. I don't know, but I feel like I've known you so long and that, I haven't had that experience where I feel like you don't know me. And I don't know, maybe you thought you were talking to somebody else a few of those times. I'm not really sure. But I would like to address the greater thing. So, and I remember you said something, maybe it was written or maybe you said it out loud to me, but that you, because of the challenges that you've had with, I don't know if you classify it a disability, but you always wanted to hire when you could people who were visually impaired.
We have a policy of interviewing anyone, and we would never discredit someone for that reason.
Yeah.
And we've had quite a few people work with us with different disabilities, and I think almost every one of them worked out really well. And I actually have a funny story on that. Back in the Now Computing days, we were hiring a salesperson, and I had this guy come in, very nice guy. Interview went great. And at the end of it, he says, well, just so you know, I have a visual impairment, and I hope that doesn't, cause a problem. And I said, just so you know, I have a visual impairment, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
And he ended up being one of my favorite employees, and, it was a great relationship.
Well, I just like the fact that I can make ugly jokes about you, and you're like, oh, well, that might be true.
Yeah,
So what do you see as, I know some of the answer to that, and I think it's implied in the fact that we're doing this new podcast, that part of what you see for the future of your endeavors is doing this, what you're calling a creative outlet, getting involved in podcasting. But what do you see for the future of your business endeavors? Where are you in 10 years?
Well, for me, I think we'll probably still be doing ReleaseWire, but we'll be doing it on a multi-channel approach. As we discussed, people aren't getting their content from one place anymore. So we have to make sure that our clients are visible in things like YouTube or, social networks and all these things. And we also have to remember that people like to consume information in different ways. Some people like to hear it. Some people like to see it. Some people like to read it. And if you're not providing all these different mediums, you're missing an opportunity. And I will take myself. I like to listen to stuff, but I hate audiobooks, mind you. I hate them.
For real?
Yeah, I hate them. And, but I love podcasts. That's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if I wanted to watch...
But this is coming from a guy who doesn't like Apple. So,
Well, yeah, I won't say I don't like
question
Apple.
your judgment, Mr. Jones.
I prefer Android and PC devices.
That's fine. I'm just teasing you. And I know why. We talked about that.
Now, and I actually have owned iPhones, and I will probably never own one again. And it's funny because Elliot is in the room in our office, the only room that actually has Apple products, and there's several in here.
That's true.
So whenever...
And I only brought half of them.
And whenever we have someone who's an Apple fan like yourself, we always say, see, we're not that bad. We still have a few of those products here.
Yeah.
Dust off the old Mac Mini.
It's a silly thing. I mean, in other walks of life, people don't have this brand of affection like, I don't know, like the whole Windows, Android, Mac, iPhone thing. Anyway, I took off.
There's a reason for that, though. I mean, think about how much we interact with
Well, it's a personal device, right?
It's so ingrained. And, one of the things I was talking about, all the different mediums, mobile is something that we're really working on, even though it's, not my primary choice for content. But when you think about it, it's with you all the time. Mm-hmm. And so many people have an affection for their mobile device that they don't have for their laptop or, their TV or whatever. It's so personal. They'll tell you that there's a reason for that, and your brain rewards you every time you bring in new information. And with a cell phone, every time you look at it, something new is being brought in. It could be something very pointless, but the brain still sees it as new information, and you're rewarded physically for it. I think that's a important part of the whole puzzle, and
we're not going to be able to stop it anytime soon.
Oh,
so
no,
we have to figure out how to harness it.
Absolutely. And for me, maybe I have that same relationship with a desktop or a laptop.
Sure.
But for most people, especially if they're on the run a lot, they don't. And I think that's a big area for us, and we're going to be really focusing on that as well.
So it's interesting because I feel like on the one hand, you're saying people digest their news in many different ways. I almost see these things, and maybe it's just a function of how things kind of ebb and flow. But boy, I feel like Facebook owns everything now.
If you had asked me that about a year ago, I probably would have agreed with you.
Yeah.
When it comes to the brand side of things, the changes that Facebook has made to increase revenue, I think have really slowed the adoption of their platform for businesses. We have one podcast that we paid to get likes because we wanted to do a test.
Yep.
So we got all these likes, hundreds and hundreds of likes. And then we issued a status update. Mm-hmm. And it only went to 5 of them.
Yep.
And the only way to get that visibility is to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
When you look a year or so ago, or whenever it was that they started really looking at revenue, the amount of attention you got as a brand was incredible.
Yeah.
So I understand why they do it. They need to have revenue, but I think it slowed that adoption. So I think for brands, it's not near as effective as it could be, even though I spend way too much time in Facebook.
Totally true. And truth be told, that's why I have a group. I started a group because the page, I can't afford to pay for the
visibility, right?
Absolutely, the visibility. They talk about engagement and anything. No, I don't even care about that. I want you to see it. People weren't even seeing it, much less engaging. So,
you can't engage if you don't see.
Yeah, and with a group, they do. Right. So I think
until
they flip the switch,
right? Yeah, like
So
you just gave me the idea if anyone from Facebook's listening,
I know.
Don't listen to Elliot right now.
And but I mean, yet. Yeah, I think Facebook still owns the world, and they have the levers. People talk about Amazon; they've lost money almost, or they come close to losing money almost every year they've been in business. But they could adjust that lever anytime they wanted to and turn on the profitability if they wanted to.
Right.
And I feel like Facebook has those levers too, and maybe they pushed it a little too far.
Yeah, I think they pushed too fast. Maybe not too far. I think it should have been a gradual thing.
But on the other hand, because as a user you can control it, and I find that I'm hitting the hide post on people way more than I am on brands. So I think brands have gotten better at putting out relevant information. So I mean, it ebbs and flows.
I don't find many brands that put out status updates that just annoy me. I have friends who I think are dear friends, but I really don't want to read what they're saying.
Yeah.
And I hide a lot of those.
Right.
And, I think my biggest concern for entrepreneurs, and we talked about this before, but the internet has been reduced to just a handful of platforms. And the control has been very centralized by a few companies. I find it so much harder to create a new product and to get the visibility that you have to sustain it. Mm-hmm. That process is way too difficult at this point because there's, a handful of gatekeepers who are making billions of dollars, and it's impossible for small businesses to be competitive in that space. And it kind of disappoints me. I liked before Google was as big as they were, and before Facebook existed, you had so many choices to go find information. You don't have that now. So I'm concerned when it comes to internet visibility for startups.
So is there anything that you feel that you can do about that?
I think looking at all different channels and really trying to focus on how you can communicate off-platform as well. And, I'm hopeful that at some point we'll have someone who comes up with a unique new idea, a new Facebook, a new Google, and you have that competition again. Because competition is what really drives innovation.
So when you say off-platform, do you mean competition or do you mean like off the internet?
I mean on the internet, not through Facebook and YouTube and Google.
Okay.
Look at any opportunities you have. Stitcher is a prime example. It's just one point of visibility, but it's not one that's under control by revenue purely. And, our job with ReleaseWire is to help people get visibility. We have found that process gets more and more difficult, especially when it comes to Google.
So do you feel that do you feel that Google is a competitor?
We have a unique relationship with Google, and it's not necessarily a positive one. We feel that Google has made our job 10 times more difficult than it should be, mainly to maximize revenue on their part. We have conversations with people in Google who say, well, we know that your content's not getting enough visibility, but if you do it with AdWords, you'll be good. And our main competition spends, we have estimated at least $15,000 a month, minimum, on AdWords. And that's not sustainable for us. So therefore, we're never getting the visibility. And especially with the recent changes Google's made to their structure and their layout, we've seen a distinct drop in organic traffic. And I'm sure there are tons of small brands out there that have that problem on a daily basis. When you have your cost per click or, the price you pay to get someone to click on your link in Google, in some industries, people are paying $100 a click.
Right.
That's not sustainable.
So as someone who's been around since the beginning of the web, like me, I know that the easy answer is that, we don't like it, that we don't, that I feel like Google and Facebook having such dominance isn't living up to the promise of the internet. But do you feel like that was inevitable? Do you think that there is anything we can do about it? Do you think that that's one of those ebb and flow things where maybe power will shift? Or is it just in the hands of these guys like it was with the TV networks back in the day?
I think you, at some point, will have someone who comes up with an innovation that changes the industry. I mean, there's got to be something that we haven't thought of. The problem is the barrier to entry is so steep. And unfortunately, there's been some new search engines that have come out in the past year or two that have actually shown promise and then are quickly acquired. And not acquired to build, but acquired to kill. Mm-hmm. I think it's really difficult. And honestly, I don't have much hope right now. The only thing that I see as being a possibility is that Facebook and Google monetize to the point where they become not useful and the users push back. That's the only thing that's going to change. And I'm already seeing that with the changes that Google's made recently. I find doing a search for true information to be more frustrating than ever. And I just hope that there's enough consumers who start feeling that and showing that, and letting Google see it.
But we have this this brand culture, at least in the United States. I don't know about other places, but McDonald's doesn't have the best burgers. And I hate picking on McDonald's, but right. They're the ones that always comes to mind, or Walmart, right? So we have these big brands. They're not the best at really. No customer's going to say that's my favorite, but yet they're huge. They're dominant. So do they just have to be good enough?
Well, when you talk about McDonald's, it's not necessarily that they're good. It's that it's convenient. I can go into McDonald's and within 5 minutes get a meal and walk out. Mm-hmm. It's convenience. I may know that meal won't be the best tasting, but I can do it. And I can do it inexpensively.
But didn't you just describe Google?
Pretty much. But that's what I'm saying. The problem is when they tilt the scales too much to advertising, getting the convenience of a quick answer becomes more difficult. And that's the only thing that's going to push them back.
We touched on the future a little bit. We talked about how we're going to take Google down. We talked about how ReleaseWire is going to replace Google going forward, right? So back to Green Bay a little bit, being Green Bay Newsmakers, and aside from ReleaseWire and aside from maybe Liberty Cafe, what are some of your favorite Green Bay businesses?
Almost every one of my favorite businesses are food related.
So should we just cut that off and say you can't say any food related ones?
I'd be in trouble. I truly, I live downtown by choice because I wanted to be where the food was. I can go within my neighborhood any day and get a totally different meal.
Mm-hmm.
And not only get a different meal, but get a different meal from someone who is local that I know. I love that. So on any given week, I'll go to Jake's Pizza, Glass Nickel, Titletown, Kaleidoscope, Monkey Tails. It's just, I love that. And I enjoy that choice that I have here. So I think most of my money is spent on food, I have to say. It really is.
So how do you feel we can foster that better? You mentioned you love Green Bay. I do too. But you recognize some of the challenges, some of the things you'd like better. How do you think we can keep that going and maybe make that grow?
It's really rough with Green Bay because of the way it's built. It's very much built as an east side, west side, and businesses look at it that way, especially your national ones. So they always want to build far in the east side, far in the west side, and I hate that. I really wish that more businesses would build central, and we know the whole Walmart story. You were very much involved on your process with.
I already talked about that twice today. We're not.
I'm sure. So I'm not a huge, fan of Walmart, but I got to the point where I almost said, well, if they build a grocery store, I don't care if there's a Walmart attached to it.
Right.
For me, the single biggest need is grocery store. Mm-hmm. And if that happened, I'd probably never go on the east or west side. I'd just be here.
Interesting. And so along that front, one of the other questions that we had in our production meeting, what do you see as the future of the Green Bay area?
Oh, that's a great question. And, again,
and you promised you didn't study.
I promise, because that's tough. You know what? I see the core community of downtown becoming very urbanized. And for someone like me, that's great. I love that. But I see a lot of people who've lived here a long time resisting that. And they're going to move further out of the city. So, you're going to see a lot of younger people, and you're going to see a lot of people moving in the community from other places in the downtown area. Mm-hmm. And I think, just in my neighborhood, I've seen a ton of that. I was telling my wife, if we can have a whole bunch of skyscrapers just around downtown, I would never leave. And she's like, well, what about living out here? No, I love an urban environment. And the new developments that are happening downtown, the new apartment buildings and such, that's the kind of community I want to be in. And I think there's a lot of people, who come from Chicago, come from Milwaukee, come from Madison, that when they came to Green Bay, maybe for a job interview, and I said, wow, this community is just not a city, mm-hmm. that pushed them away. And I think we're kind of solving that while still keeping that small town feel at the same time.
Yeah, it's it is really nice, like to be able to walk around in Milwaukee, walk around in Chicago, even in the winter. In here, I feel like I always have to hop in the car almost everywhere I go, and that. I don't like that because, for one thing, it's not helping my waistline either. So I'm kind of with you, and I mean, I'm a lifelong Green Bay guy, so I didn't have the benefit or the downside, I guess, of having to live in Bears country. But I'm so optimistic about the things that we have going on. The whole thing going on by Titletown Brewing Company, the apartments you mentioned. I love it. I think it's great. We didn't talk about how we're going to finish up. I have my my outro here, and I can read through that.
Well, you can do that, but on behalf of the Newsmakers team, we are so excited about you being here and being part of this show. I really am going to enjoy working with you and seeing all the great guests that we have come in. I truly enjoy Ideas by Elliot, and I think people should definitely subscribe to that and listen to it. And I love the fact that you've been, so willing to expand your time and to work with us. And, you're probably going to be doing podcasts forever at this rate. So,
Yeah, well, this is the third one today, so it's been kind of nuts.
That's great, though.
Yeah, it is good.
So we're truly excited.
I'm going to wrap up then. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends on Twitter or Facebook, or even better, submit a show review to iTunes or Stitcher. You can do this by visiting greenbaynewsmakers.com/1. That's the number 1. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends on Facebook or Twitter, or even better, submit a show review to iTunes or Stitcher. To listen to other episodes of Green Bay Newsmakers, visit greenbaynewsmakers.com/episodes. To support our podcast, please visit our sponsors who make this show possible. You can do this by visiting greenbaynewsmakers.com/sponsors. Green Bay Newsmakers is a proud member of the Newsmakers Podcast Network, an ever-growing network of podcasts covering a wide range of topics. Check them out at npcn.tv.
Thank you for listening to Green Bay Newsmakers. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. If you or someone you know would be an incredible guest on the show, email us at guests@greenbaynewsmakers.com. To stay up to date, visit greenbaynewsmakers.com or connect with us on Facebook and Twitter.